Ukrainian drones ST-Reich Russian train, and the sky turned to fire. At 13:59 p.m., a formation of 11 Ukrainian drones descended through crosswinds over southern Zaporizhia. Their target, a Russian ammunition train hauling 4,000 tons of explosives and fuel-grade propellant. Within 90 seconds, that convoy would cease to exist. From 40 kilometers away, satellite feeds captured the first ignition, a pinpoint flash traveling faster than the sound that followed. Freight Car 6 erupted, its thermal signature spiking past 1,300 degrees Celsius. The shockwave rippled down the rail line, twisting steel like rope and hurling debris 200 meters into the air. Inside the Ukrainian bunker, the operators didn't cheer. They simply watched the data. Impact radius, secondary ignition, temperature flux, all confirming the same result. The train was gone. Because in this war, victory doesn't come from noise. It comes from precision, silence, and timing measured in milliseconds. 13:47. On the southern edge of occupied Zaporizhia, a faint thermal bloom appeared on satellite feed. Too straight, too steady to be random. Analysts traced it to a Russian ammunition convoy, 15 cars long, rolling at 45 kilometers per hour toward the front. Inside an underground command post, 10 Ukrainian operators waited among cables and cold air. Their drones, 11 in total, sat armed and silent, propellers glinting under red lamps. Then the ground trembled. A 152mm shell landed 800 meters away, throwing dust from the ceiling. The Russians had detected the power surge the moment all 11 brushless motors spun up together. An invisible flare of electricity that gave away their position. They had 12 minutes to strike before the enemy artillery bracketed their grid. Abort and live, or continue and risk everything. No one spoke. 3 teams occupied separate bunkers, spaced 500 meters apart, each with mirrored screens showing the same feed. Even if one bunker vanished under fire, the others would keep the mission alive. Through the narrow slit of the lead drone's camera, the operators saw the railway glinting in the distance, faint heat shimmering above metal tracks. One technician whispered, "Target confirmed." The commander's reply was calm, almost detached. "Begin the uplink." Outside, 11 small rotors whined together, lifting into the gray sky, like a handful of sparks rising from a buried forge. The hunt for the train had begun. 13:52. 5 minutes after liftoff, the formation split across the rolling steppe. 3 reconnaissance drones drifted ahead like metallic hawks, scanning for obstacles along the 20-kilometer corridor to the railway. Their flight path was steady, altitude locked at 75 meters, ground speed climbing to 98 kilometers per hour. But the silence didn't last. A BTR-82A positioned near a forest clearing picked up their heat signatures and opened fire. Tracer rounds arced through the daylight, orange sparks slicing empty air. One drone caught a glancing hit. Its left rotor jammed, sending it spiraling into a field of rye. The other 2 dropped altitude instantly, sliding beneath radar coverage, their signals flickering but alive. Inside the command bunkers, the operators' headsets erupted with distortion. Static, clicks, then nothing. A Russian Lear 3 electronic warfare vehicle had powered up, flooding the spectrum with 10 kilowatts of noise. For ordinary systems, that would mean silence. But these weren't ordinary systems. Each surviving drone trailed a line of fiber-thin optical cable, thinner than a strand of hair, transmitting data at nearly the speed of light, untouchable by radio interference. The Russians didn't know it yet, but their own jamming was blinding every friendly unit in range. Their radios died first. Tank crews shouted to each other through open hatches, unaware that the signal they jammed now trapped them in silence. Back in the Ukrainian bunker, the commander leaned over the glowing console, whispering into his mic, "Maintain altitude. Stay low. We're still invisible." Through the lead drone's lens, the convoy was clearer now. 15 freight cars, 2 armored escorts, crawling along a single unguarded stretch of steel. The next move would have to be perfect. And if you were in that bunker, knowing artillery was already re-aiming for your coordinates, would you still push forward? 13:59. The moment everything aligned. The Russian ammunition train had just entered a 1.8-kilometer stretch of exposed rail, with no embankments, no trees, no overhead cover. It was the perfect window, 91 seconds where every car would be visible. 9 Ukrainian drones approached from 3 directions, 3 high, 4 low, 2 maintaining centerline formation. Their motors hummed through the crosswind, blades cutting the thin autumn air. Inside the bunker, the operator's screens pulsed with telemetry. Wind drift 4.2 meters per second, signal delay 0.003 seconds, distance to intercept 4,700 meters and closing. The first Russian counter-battery round struck 560 meters from the command post, showering the hillside with gravel. The second landed closer, 380 meters, splitting one of the underground fiber lines. 2 drones lost direct feed, switching automatically to short-range radio. It was enough for the Russians to detect them. A radar ping blinked on a Pantsir S-1 console near the rail junction. The air defense crew reacted instantly, launching a burst of 30mm airburst shells. The explosions painted the sky with tungsten flashes, fragments scattering like sparks across an anvil. Drone 7 disintegrated mid-flight, but the remaining 8 altered course at 45-degree angles, zigzagging through their own smoke trails. At 2,900 meters, the low-altitude group dropped to just 7 meters above ground, disappearing behind a line of cargo cranes. Pantsir's guns couldn't depress low enough to follow. Seconds later, the high-altitude decoy team climbed to 200 meters, forcing the operator to adjust his radar gate upward, exactly as planned. The low-altitude swarm accelerated, reaching 112 kilometers per hour, riding the thermal draft created by the airburst detonations. Then the first payload struck, a shaped charge impacting the coupling between locomotive and freight car number 2. The shockwave traveled down the train like a steel whip. A second hit followed half a second later, fracturing a brake manifold and locking the trailing cars. Through the feed, the operators saw sparks blossom beneath the wheels, and then a ripple of fire stretching across the tracks. The corridor of rail had turned into a burning line of motionless metal. 4:01. 12 seconds after the first impact, the battlefield dissolved into haze. The shockwave had kicked up a wall of ash and vaporized diesel that clung to the air like molten fog. Through the smoke, the operators could see only flickers of orange and silver, fragments of rail twisting under unbearable heat. The Russian response came fast. A Murmansk BN jammer near the rail hub powered to full capacity, flooding the region with 12 kilowatts of electromagnetic energy. Every known frequency between 100 megahertz and 3 gigahertz vanished under the static. The sky turned silent for both sides. Russian radios went dead, command nets broke apart, and the Pantsir's radar froze mid-sweep. Inside the Ukrainian bunker, the noise floor rose, but the light link held steady. Data pulsed through glass at 200,000 kilometers per second, invisible, untouchable. One operator switched feeds between surviving drones. Their cameras showed a mosaic of chaos, burning freight cars, overturned escorts, and flashes of munitions cooking off in sequence. 2 drones lost navigation stability as the heat updraft warped their sensors. The commander overrode manual control, adjusting pitch and yaw through stored profiles. 1 drone recovered. The other descended uncontrollably, clipping a power mast before plunging into smoke. At the rail junction, the Pantsir resumed fire blindly, guided only by residual heat signatures. The barrels glowed crimson, accuracy collapsing as recoil twisted the mounts. Each misfire scattered glowing fragments across the terrain, igniting dry brush and creating more smoke. For 41 seconds, visibility dropped below 5 meters. The battlefield had become a storm of static, heat, and metal fatigue. Every system, every signal, every sound, swallowed by interference and dust. And in that blindness, the final drones moved freely. 4:02. The fog of heat lifted just enough to reveal the aftermath. The Russian ammunition train had fractured in 3 places. Freight car 12 was burning from the inside, its roof panels bulging like softened wax. Freight car 6 had derailed completely, carving a trench through the earth for nearly 120 meters before coming to rest on its side. The locomotive itself was still running, wheels spinning against air, traction lost, a mechanical heartbeat refusing to stop. From the air, the Ukrainian operators watched the pattern unfold. Drone 1, its camera half blinded by soot, dove toward the locomotive's undercarriage. At 76 kilometers per hour, the onboard payload triggered, detonating directly beneath the coupling frame. The front section separated, shearing cleanly through half-inch steel pins. At the same moment, Drone 4 and Drone 8 approached from opposite vectors, their courses only 40 meters apart. The first struck the train's auxiliary generator, the second clipped a fuel reservoir. The twin flashes merged into a single expanding plume. Not a conventional explosion, but a shock wave of compressed air and vaporized fuel that rolled across the railway like a living thing. Pressure sensors in the Ukrainian control bunker spiked, readings equivalent to 400 kilograms of TNT released in an open corridor. Freight cars flipped. Bolts, ladders, and plates scattered like paper in a gale. No one in the bunker spoke. They only listened to the faint rumble that followed 3 seconds later, echoing through the soil like a heartbeat from underground. The train, the smoke, the rail, all blurred into one trembling horizon. And beyond that horizon, a silence stretched so complete, it felt like the sky itself had stopped breathing. 4:07. 5 minutes after the final detonation, the wind changed. The black column that had once been a rail convoy now stretched into the sky, curling eastward over the steppe like a storm front. Satellite relays confirmed thermal readings above 1,400 degrees Celsius, enough to melt the steel ballast beneath the tracks. For 7 kilometers in every direction, vegetation burned in rippling waves. The Ukrainian operators powered down their stations one by one. Cooling fans slowed, screens dimmed, leaving only the distant rumble of artillery that no longer mattered. Out of the original 11 drones, 5 had survived intact. 2 were damaged beyond flight, and 4 were gone, consumed in the corridor of fire. The total material cost of the entire strike, $5,340. The cost of what it destroyed, nearly $128 million in logistics, armor plating, and ammunition. Russian recovery teams arrived within 20 minutes, but found only molten rails, craters filled with half-solid iron, and a twisted engine block buried nose first in the earth. The tactical map that morning had marked this rail line as Vital Corridor 7. By evening, it was reclassified as unserviceable, indefinite. For Ukraine's analysts, the data told a simple truth. Precision had outweighed power. For every missile worth millions, there existed a counterstrike worth thousands. And every time the sky dimmed with smoke, it wasn't the sound of destruction. It was the shape of adaptation. As dusk fell over the shattered valley, the last drone's feed flickered out, showing, for a final second, a reflection of its own firelight dancing across the ruined steel. Then, the screen went black. By 4:15 that afternoon, the battlefield had quieted to an unnatural calm. The plume of smoke from the destroyed rail line drifted east, its shadow stretching across kilometers of scorched steppe. The strike had lasted less than 2 minutes, but in that span, an entire supply artery feeding Russia's southern front had been erased. Sensors aboard high-orbit satellites confirmed what the operators already knew. Temperature decay across the impact zone had dropped from 1,400 degrees to ambient, leaving nothing but molten rail and cratered soil. Inside the bunker, screens dimmed one by one. Out of 11 drones, 5 returned, their propellers still coated in soot. The total cost, just over $5,000. The total damage, over $120 million in rolling stock, ammunition, and logistics infrastructure. A ratio so lopsided it would soon be studied in every defense lab from Warsaw to Washington. And yet, the crew didn't celebrate. They sat in silence, listening to the fading static of what used to be enemy transmissions. In that stillness, they understood the real victory wasn't in destruction. It was in proving that adaptation could rewrite the rules of warfare. Tell me, when a handful of drones can collapse a supply chain worth millions, is dominance still measured by size or by precision? Let me know what you think, because the next strike might change everything again.